Alright, well I got the lifts done. Now I need to focus my attention on the extension wing for the table saw. And I've had every intention to use laminate. That's why I got that scrap laminate from another video. However, I'm not having good luck at all delaminating it from the particle board. I don't know if they changed the glue or what, but it is really not coming apart. So I'm not going to do this one out of laminate. This wing is going to go to the other side, and this one is actually going to be just some hardwood plywood. I didn't know I had this piece in the shop, so it's been in here for a long time. It is stable. It's pretty darn straight, and I'm going to use it. It's hardwood, excuse me, hardwood birch plywood. It's only a 7-ply. It's not a Baltic birch, but it'll do the job just fine. So I'm going to get this cut up and figure out where to go from here. All right, so this is my 3/4 inch hardwood plywood extension wing. It is cut to the exact size that I need for the wing, and I've taken some of the same material and ripped it down to 2 3/4 inch, and I'm going to use this to pocket hole screw a little frame together, and then pocket hole screw the entire frame to the tabletop. Once that's done, flip it upside down, and I may use another 1/2 inch layer of plywood on top of that to laminate the two together. And that way when I cut out my inserts, I can cut through the 1/2 inch plywood and then use that exact same 1/2 inch plywood material to create a bunch of inserts that I can just throw in there as needed. So that's probably what I'm going to do. And once I have that done, I will mount it to the saw itself, and then I can take a measurement, my distance down for my cabinet, how high I need to make the cabinet to sit underneath it. And I'm not going to make a traditional cabinet that's going to enclose the entire router lift assembly because, oh, that's heavy. Because a couple things. I want to have this area in here small, smaller area, dust collection, sucking it all down, less places for dust to build up. Number two. The smaller I make it, the more surface area I have on my station to store all my junk, like push sticks and stuff. And number three, that just looks cool. So I want to showcase this. I want to be able to see all this stuff. So that's going to be another thing. What I'm going to do is I'm going to come in right here and right here. That's going to be the distance, my width of the cabinet. I'm going to enclose this whole side with a piece of 3/4 inch plywood. Front and back, let's see, yeah, this will be the front, which is the front side of the table saw, and of course the back side. And then on the sides of it, I want to showcase all this, like I said, but I still have this gap I need to take care of down here. So I'm just going to use a piece of 3/4 inch ply, starting underneath this, going all the way down. And this also does another thing for me. I'm using a 4-inch dust collection hose, so I need a little bit more air movement. And if I just have a couple of holes at the top for router bits to stick through, that's not really that much airflow. So there's a little pathway for air to travel through this whole mechanism, both sides. So I'm thinking that combined with the 2 holes up at the top for the router bits and these little passages of airway for air to flow through, that'll be enough air to create the downward volume to move all the dust down. So small cabinet, being able to see all this, more airflow in a smaller little space, and somewhere near the bottom I'm going to have my switches and whatnot, but it's going to be cool. So I moved my wing over to the other side, and that's a lot of space over there. I didn't realize I was going to gain that much area. Now I'm working on putting these routers together over here. And what I've done is I've got the 3/4 inch top piece. That's going to be the structure of the top of the cabinet, and I'm going to layer on top of that some 1/2 inch ply, and that will allow me to cut out my insert out of that 1/2 inch ply, and then use the scrap pieces from the tabletop itself to cut insert plates, and hopefully it'll all line up just nice and neat. So I've got my 3/4, my 1/2 inch, and I can measure up to the table saw surface, which I'm getting a very accurate 16 7/8 all the way across. So that's how tall my side pieces of the cabinet are going to be. And I'm going to get them cut out of 3/4 inch ply real quick. And if I'm extremely close as far as being under a little bit, I can always shim the bottom of the cabinet with some paper. And if I'm too tall, I can shim the bottom of the cabinet, or bottom of the table saw cabinet. So it'll work out pretty good. I just need to get a couple pieces cut for the sides and then start assembling this top. So I'm sizing the pieces for the side of this cabinet. And it's not going to be a traditional cabinet that's going to enclose the entire thing. It's just going to enclose the center section. So what I'm doing is, this is all 1/2 inch ply. So on the third sheet, which is what rests up against the inclined plane that moves. So the third sheet, I'm going to start here and come over 13 inches to the third sheet on this one. And I'm going to come down my 16 7/8 inch to the bottom of this base. To do so, I have to mark out and remove these 3/8 of an inch square holes. It's actually going to be a 7/16 drilled hole, and there's going to be a T-nut coming this way that will accept the threaded rod going that way to tighten down the locking mechanism in here. So a really handy way of locking this whole carriage in place. So I've got to mark out for these and drill 7/16 inch holes. Just on the front side, the back side is going to be just nice and flat. And I've already got these 2 panels. This is going to be my front. And I found where the square holes are going to be, or the square removal spots are. And now I just need to drill those out. Alright, so I'm drilling out a counter bore for this T-nut. The only T-nuts that Lowe's had locally are these screw down kind. I'm not too fond of these, but that's the only ones that they had in a 3/8 inch by 16 thread, so that's the ones I'm going to use. And I've got a Forstner bit that makes a really snug fit for it, and it's going to go in like so. My only problem is that this surface here needs to sit flush with the router lift going this way. So this all has to be flush, but my screw heads, these tiny screw heads that I have, they are going to sit proud of this surface just a little bit. So I have to find the correct distance to make this all work while maintaining as much thickness as I can in the 3/4 inch ply. But I think this is going to work out alright. So I've got the cabinet itself done for the routers here, and like I said, I left the mechanisms all on the outside, so it'd be neat to look at and less dust build up. This is a relatively small box for both routers, so I'm hoping that there's not going to be any dust accumulation. It'll just suck it all down. But with the routers all the way up, I've got a problem with the lip of the router being a little bit proud of the top of this. So my first layer for the tabletop is, let's see, like this. It's going to go in place like so. It's going to be just a piece of 3/4 inch hardwood plywood, and I had to cut out 2 squares to accept the router themselves when they're in their full upright position. My original plan was to use these squares as a guide with my flush trim bit to cut out insert plate areas on this piece of 1/2 inch ply, which is going to go on top. But when I cut these, I used my jigsaw, and I've got a really crappy jigsaw. It didn't do a good job at all, and my lines are a little wavy, so I don't know, maybe I can sand these kind of straight and then cut it. I don't know. I may just make a little square template to set down on top of it based upon the center point and route out from there. That may be what I do. So I don't know, but I'm getting close to wrapping this thing up. I've taken the back rail off. It's just 2 bolts holding right there, so it's real simple to get to. And I've had to make these very tiny shims. They're like 1/16 of an inch. And I'm going to eventually shim this all the way up. But just to test fit it, it's going to go in place like so, sliding up against the front rail, and then this piece of 1/2 inch is going to go on top of it. Something is telling me not to glue these two together. I don't know, I'm really thinking about just screwing this down in various spots, countersinking the screws. It's not going to be a problem, it's not going to affect the function of it. It just may not look as clean as if I did it without the screws, but I don't know, something's telling me don't screw it down. Alright, so I'm at the point where I've cut a hole in the top and I need to route out my holes for the insert plate. I'm going to route out flush trim with the plate below and then probably use a rabbiting bit to increase the size. But first, good time to test this whole thing. I've got the blast gate open below, and I've got this little access panel on this side that I can remove to check for sawdust and whatnot, but the cords are originally going to come out, or eventually going to come out this side, so I'm going to take this opportunity to turn the dust collector on while I'm routing this hole, both of these holes, and I'm not going to screw this back in place, just set it in there and the suction should hold it shut, and see how well that this dust collection works. Alright, so I just cut these, and I don't know if it's showing up on camera, but that's all the dust that I had on top. So, open this up, and check right where this cord is. I got a little pile up right here, not much at all. And right where this cord is right here, I have a little pile up. Other than that, bad lighting, but there's none in here, so that worked out really well. These cords aren't going to obviously be bundled up like this. I just haven't opened them up, so that worked pretty good. I decided against using a rabbiting bit to cut off this 1/2 inch top for the insert plate. Reason being is this particular square I cut with the jigsaw on the 3/4 side. It's not flush and nice and square, so my bearing would just follow my imperfections and transfer those to the top surface. I don't want that, so what I've done is I've cut, using the same piece of 1/2 inch plywood, I've cut 8 of these 5 inch by 5 inch plates that I'm going to use. And all I got to do is take my old insert plate guide. I made this for my homemade insert plate on my old router table. And I kept it to the side simply because I thought I would use it down the road, and here I am and I need it. So all I got to do is push it off to one corner and adjust my pocket hole screws, take them out and slide everything in, and that'll leave me a nice perfect template, and center it and then just cut it out. Alright, I've adjusted my guide system so that my new insert plates fit in there pretty darn snug. I don't know what happened with these pieces, but somehow 2 of them have swelled up on me, so my top surfaces are no longer flush. That's going to be okay. I'm using a flush trim bit with the bearing above the bit, so I'm going to be cutting down, and I've set the depth so that I'm not going to cut 100% through this top surface. I'm going to leave 1/16 or less of an inch all the way around, and that's for 2 reasons. One, because it's not going to be perfect anyway because of these 2 joints right here, and 2, once I get all the material removed as best I can, I'm going to come back with a chisel and clean it up. I don't want to remove any of the 3/4 inch plywood below. That way when this plate sits down in place, it's on the same resting surface as the rest of this 1/2 inch, and everything should be just lined up nice and perfect. So that's the plan anyway. Well, that dust collection really worked pretty good right there, so I'm excited to see that. But before I move my my template, I'm going to use these edges and a chisel to square up these corners. Alright, I got both of my insert holes cut out, and I've taken one of these plates and just rounded over all the edges and all the corners just a little bit, and also done the same thing with the actual hole. It could look better, but it serves the same. It serves a great function. The inserts are made of the same material as the top itself, so there's no leveling required. It all nice, slides nice and smooth, and this is really good. This works out really well. I've got a lot of these to sand, and then also I've got to find a way to make sure I get the hole in the correct spot. These are slightly off center because I didn't go by the center of the router. I just eyeballed it. So probably going to put a bit in the router itself, maybe like a brad point drill bit, and raise it up and get an impression on the bottom side. To secure the cabinet to the stand itself, I just took some of this scrap pieces of 2x material, and I've got 2 screws going into the cabinet and 1, 2, 3 screws going down into the stand itself. One of these on either side, and that should be fine. I was originally going to put pocket hole screws in this piece going down, but just the whole pocket hole screws would kind of look ugly compared to everything else. I've got this whole theme of open screw heads going all the way through this whole build, so why not keep it going right here? So that works out really good, nice and strong, and very accessible if I want to remove this down the road. I started sanding all these insert plates with a piece of disc sandpaper, and that worked well, but I had a lot to do, so I decided to use one of my sanders. And I went for my orbital sander, random orbital sander, but I forgot about these little pad sanders. I haven't used this thing in a while, and it did a really good job, so I'm going to use the same thing to round over all these edges nice and smooth. Yeah, it did very well in here, so I'm just going to continue to use it all the way around. I was originally going to use a router to round these over, but I think that's just unnecessary. Alright, here's my solution for the handles. I didn't want to go too crazy, I just want this thing to work. So up here you got your locking knobs. That'll lock the lift in place on both of these. And once they're loose, these work really well. Get it to the height you want it, and lock it down. So nothing fancy. I think, yeah, John used wheels on his, and it looks great. But I don't have a lot of room down here, and I got a lot of things to worry about. I made this a little bit too long, but I wanted extra strength up there, so that's kind of limiting factor. The distance in between the two is a little limiting factor. This over here is limiting, so I didn't go too extravagant, but they work just fine, so I'm pleased with that. Alright, part of relocating this variable speed control, I had to cut the hard connections and resolder some wires in here. So I'm not a perfectionist. I'm a DIYer, so that'll hold up pretty good. And I've got a nice clean on the other side. I've got a nice clean button that is variable speed. So I'm happy with that. Alright, so the electrical is done. I've got my variable speed. I've got my router selection. And I've got my power. Alright, electrical's done. The tops are done. I've got some insert plates, 3 for this one, 4 for that one. I color coded them. They're all blue for up here. And I've just got a little blue line, and you line up the lines for the correct orientation. And then same thing back there, green and green. Just because when I cut this insert opening, the bit may not be centered. So once I drill all my holes, then I don't want them to be, I'm exaggerating here, but if the bit is over here and I rotate it around, it's going to be in the wrong spot. So just want to keep everything in the same orientation for consistency purposes. But man, I've got to clean up in here. I've got I think I've got every single tool I own scattered all over the place, on the floor, behind everything, more over here on the floor. So I've got to get this place straightened up before I test this out. Alright, now I need to mark the holes for the insert plates. And what I've done is, this router comes with a 1/2 inch, 3/8, and a 1/4 inch collet adapter. So I'm taking one of my Forstner bits, it's got the point on the top, that's 3/8, and sliding it down into the router itself. And that way I can lower the router as far down as it'll go, and use it to push up the insert plate. Very gently give it a tap or two, and that will transfer my center point. And once I have my center point on all of these, then I can start drilling out for my zero clearance inserts. Well, I took the top off and I put a couple coats of lacquer on it, and I waxed it on top of that. So I've got about 3 coats of lacquer and some wax on top. Works great. I've cut some insert plate openings. These two are 2 1/8 inch, I believe. And I've also cut a smaller one. But the bigger the hole, the better the dust collection I've found out so far. I've also moved the electrical to this side. The reason being is it's kind of sticking out and in the way over here, and the fence design I've came up with is going to be on this side. I originally had the fence on that side, but I think it's going to work out a lot better on this side. So, when you're using a router table, you want to go from right to left, so you're working into the cutting edge of the router bit. So this will be good for me standing back here. I can just naturally push material through right to left. Just the same way I would on my table saw. So this will be a lot more convenient for me. Also, all my controls, electrical, and then the elevation, it's all in one spot, so that's neat. And I originally wanted to put a paddle over here for a safety off switch, but there's no need to. I'm going to flip this upside down so that the on is pushed down on the bottom and then the off is on top, because when I get in here with my knee, I can't hold the camera and show you at the same time, but when I get in here with my knee, I can easily hit the top of it, and it is very difficult for me to hit the bottom. So if it's very difficult for me to hit the bottom, that's going to be my on, and easy for me to hit the top, that'll be my off. So no need in an extra safety switch, because that's already cumbersome enough for me to accidentally bump into. But now I've got to start building this fence, and to do that I'm going to go hit SketchUp first. Alright, I've got all my parts cut out, and now I'm working on making these tapers right here on the front and back piece. Now I've already done the back piece, and it turned out really well. And what I did is I set my height right here, and then wherever this came out to be, and just connected the dots basically. And once I had a line drawn on my piece, I could put it face down on my jointing jig, my little table saw jointing jig, and looking from the bottom, make sure my reference line that I just made is lined up with this zero clearance. And once I had the first one set up, all I did, probably can't see it, but I've got a pencil mark. See right there, I've got a pencil mark that is my layout basically. So only had to make one layout, cut this the way I needed it to, flip it around, line it up with my scribe mark on my jointing jig. Now I can cut the remaining pieces and they're all accurate. So that's going to work out pretty well. Alright, so here's the fence. Obviously material running through here. It's not that wide. I don't really want a real wide fence. But if I remove this, you can kind of see what's going on. In the first router position, I've got a blast gate. This goes all the way down and stops the airflow all the way back. And then what I can do is take this out, and to just simply plug the hole, just put it in this way. So you can see that it's opening up all the way through there. And then I can slide it over to the next router so that the first router is still enclosed in the fence, and I can still utilize that hole for dust collection. And then the second router is also right here for the dust collection as well. So better dust collection with the second router, and then I guess okay dust collection with the first router. We'll see how this all works out, but that's how it's all going to be. And everything's going to attach to the front with pocket hole screws, and then on the back side I think I'm just going to use some just drywall screws and be done with it. So for a little inspiration on how I wanted to make this fence, I just went to Wood Gears, and also iBuildit.ca. It took a little bit of both. So from the Wood Gears site, Mathias has a smaller style fence on his router table, and I don't recall if it was on his hybrid saw or if it was on his older saw, but it was in this orientation, if I'm not mistaken, where it was on the right wing and a smaller fence was on the right hand side, so you could just push it through just like you're using your table saw. And also John and iBuildit.ca, he has 2 dust collection ports for his router. And basically, I've got the same setup as him, except on my back dust collection port, I've got another router right there. So what I've got is, in the first router position, I've got a little blast gate that is actually a little bit further back than what it needs to be. It needs to be a little closer to the bit, but we'll see how this works. And I can route with this and have the single dust collection port. Maybe this might be exposed, I don't know, depending on what that is. But also, if I needed to use this one, I can take my blast gate out and slide it forward, and now I'm basically in the same setup as John's. I've got a router in the front and a dust collection port in the back. And because the blast gate's open and the channel goes all the way back to the back router, I'm using both dust collection ports. So I've turned the dust collection on. Can't really tell on camera because it's so loud, but I've turned the dust collection on. And from right here, you can kind of hear the air being blown through. But if you move it like this, you can really hear some velocity. So I think this is going to work out really well. Now to move it front and back, I'm going to find a good position, say right here, and I'm going to drill through the tabletop and make some hand knobs, some longer hand knobs, kind of like the knobs that I have for the locking mechanism on the lifts themselves, and make a slot in my fence itself. That way I can loosen it up, slide it forward, tighten it down, and go back and forth. So I think that's going to work out. Took a little bit from both websites and I came up with this. So all kinds of good information on both of those sites, by the way. So to move the fence forward and backward, I need some type of knob to lock it all down. So what I've done is I've made a couple of these. And it's just a piece of 1 inch by 1 inch by 3 inch pine, and I drilled as close to center as I could with a hand drill, drilled out a 5/16 hole, and then tapped it with a metal tap to a 3/8 by 20, and that way I can thread it in there with just a tad bit of Gorilla Glue, and the thread is in there nice and tight, and the Gorilla Glue will really hold it, and then I can just use a jam nut to lock it all in place. And then I'm going to put a washer here, and it's going to go through the 3/4 plywood on the fence, 3/4 plywood on the table, and there will be a T-nut somewhere near the bottom of all that. So I've got lacquer sprayed on all this stuff. The fence is outside with some lacquer on it. I'm just playing the waiting game now.